Let's do an ACR1 correction. This is actually one of your images. What I'm looking for you to do is to explore everything that's happening in the Adobe Camera Raw dialog box. Of course, you don't have to explore everything on every single image, but I want you to play and dig deep. Go beyond the basics panel. So let's open this image. To do that, I need to come up here to the little aperture. If I were shooting it with my RAW from camera, I could just hit Command O and it would open into Adobe Camera Raw. But because this is a TIFF, part of the limitation of our website that I have, I need to open it this way to get into Adobe Camera Raw. You can open JPEGs or TIFFs this way, but only TIFFs that have no layers. Okay, so here we are into Adobe Camera Raw. It opens us up into the Basics panel. So if you need to do a color correction to an image, you're going to want to start with the white balance tool. But I don't feel like I need to do that with this particular image. It just really depends. One of the things I might want to play with, though, are the color profiles. So we can come in here and we can play with different artistic ones. And as you see, as I scroll over these, it gives me different looks. So it's changing the base look of the image. Do I do this all of the time? No, I do not. I do it some of the time, though, when I want to create some pop, or I want to create a mood, or I want to create a vintage effect. It's a great start point for a look, and then you can go in and refine it. I actually like what happens when I use this Modern 7 on this particular image. The colors really start to pop. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to come up here and just notice you can play with the amount. You can add or subtract from it. 100 is the base. I just clicked on the slider, and it took me back to 100. Now I'm going to hit close. Now I can come in here into the basics panel and do whatever I would like to do here. So looking at the histogram up top here, I've got a lot of room over here on the right, which means I can push the whites over and it's going to brighten my image. And as I keep pushing it, a little warning pops up right up here, this little red guy. I don't really need it that bright, so I'm going to pull it back because I don't want to lose the information that's in the image. If I push it too far, you can go pure white, doesn't look good, or that just looks dull and yucky. So somewhere about there, I'm eyeballing it. There's not a necessarily right or wrong way to do this. It's what you want to do. But what is wrong? Most of the time, losing your shadow detail and losing your highlight detail, unless you have a purpose for that. So I pushed the whites up. I'm going to push the shadows to the right because I think I want a little bit more shadow detail inside of the sign. When I play with the highlights, I can push those down a little bit. It's making the sky a little bit bluer. The whites are popping out a little bit more. Now, the black and the whites with contrast. If I push the contrast slider, notice what's happening here in the blacks. It's getting darker and the whites are getting whiter, so we're having more oomph added to the image. I really don't need to adjust the exposure. When you start from blacks to whites to shadows to highlights, if you have a good exposure, a lot of times you don't need to come in here and mess with this. And if you do, it's going to be minimal, not a big deal. So that's how I like to run through the basics with black, white, shadows, and textures. Well, sorry, I was just looking at the word textures thinking, oh, let's see what textures does next. So with the texture, it's defining things a little bit more. Double click, but maybe I would prefer to use clarity. So a lot of times I'll play with both of them. Clarity is more intense than texture. I think that a little bit of texture add is working here, and I'm really seeing it pop out over by the S in here. Then we have vibrance and saturation. The vibrance are the colors of the image that are not neutral. So it's not going to push neutral colors like skin tones. But if I push this up, you can see my sky is getting much more intense. The yellow, though, is staying pretty much the same. Some of the red. Double click again. Now if I do the same thing with the saturation, much more yellow is coming out. It doesn't look good at all. So I'm just going to, whoops, get that. Go back. There we go. I'll just give that a little bump. So that's my basics panel. Now what else is there to explore? We have a curve panel. If I've come in here and blown anything out to pure white, remember 255, 255, 255 is pure white, I can move my cursor around and see if there's anything like that. There's really not in this image. And I have an RGB value right here below the histogram. If I come up here into the sky, you can see I'm at 215, 222, 248. I don't need to do anything, but if I had blown it out, I could grab this little top edge and pull my output down to 250 and that would be where my whites would top out, giving me a little bit of tone. So I'll just push that back. I don't need to do that right now. Something also fun in here, if I wanted to add some contrast, if I click from point to parametric, we do point for the output slider, but parametric we can add contrast like when we learned our curves. So I can pop up my midtones and pull down my midtone darks and midtone lights. I don't need to do that on this image. I'm kind of liking how it's looking, but just know that's there and it's something to play with. And it gives you a little bit more control if you use points and parametric, depending which one, over just using the contrast right here. So if you want to be more precise, use a curve. Next up we have details. We can do sharpening and noise reduction here. We're not going to do sharpening here. You're going to learn how to do sharpening in Photoshop. It's going to be a more controlled sharpen for you. Noise reduction though, if you have a highly noisy image, this is something you could play with. I didn't give you anything that was really noisy. Next up though, one of my favorites, Hue, Saturation, and Luminance. So this red in here, if I click on this up here in the top in the menu, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over, this is a targeted adjustment tool. And when I click on this red, it's going to be red and magenta, and I can alter the color. Do you see how that's really popping out much redder now? If I come over here to this yellow in the hat area, I can alter that. Now, one thing you notice, it's affecting all of the yellows, so just be aware of that. Luminance, it's the lightness and darkness, so there we're making it dark, and here we're making it brighter. I kind of actually like that. And I could use the target adjustment tool here, but if I just really wanted to say, oh, I want to hit the blues, I can do something like that as well. So right now, I'm playing with that. Ooh, that's looking kind of good. A little back and forth here. In Hue, we can just totally change the color. Okay, so just know that this is here. I use this a lot to fine-tune things. We've got split toning. Play with it, see what it does. If I change the hue of the highlights, you can see what it's kind of doing here. So you can create some interesting effects by playing with that. And you can do the same thing with the shadows. I can change my shadow to more of a bluish color. And you can see if I come up here now, and I can create something like this. Then I can shift the balance between the two. Okay, double click, I want to get out of this. I'm not liking what it's looking like, but something to play with. You might find it useful. Next up, lens correction. You can remove any kind of adjustments that are going on in your lenses. It's not going to really apply to these because that information is not in these files. But with your raw files, I would definitely come here and turn this on and let the default setup. You'll see things straighten. Any kind of abnormalities in your lenses, this is going to take care of it. FX, you can add some grain, size. Now you can't really see it here, so what we need to do is we need to make this larger so we can actually see the grain. Okay, I think I made it too large. Not that large. There we go. Just like in Photoshop, if I use my spacebar, it turns into the hand tool and I can move things. So now you can see the grain as I adjust it. A lot of times I like grain. I think it unifies an image. It reminds me of the old school film days. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. If I downsize it, right now I'm just using the arrow keys. You can see it's not sizing to my frame the way I'd like. If I want it to be in that frame, I just come back to fit in window. And there we go. So I've added a little bit of grain. If I wanted to add a little bit of a vignette, I can do that. So I'll push that in there. You can play with the midpoint, the roundness. To tell you the truth, I don't do it a lot here for myself, but sometimes I do. So know that those two elements are here. This is process versions. If you've been working in Photoshop or ACR for a while, you might have older versions, and that's what this is. So just know that you can change your process version from 5, which is current, all the way back to 1. When you open up an older file, initially it'll ask you for what you want to do, if you want to stay in that version or if you want to update. These are like those profiles we started at the very beginning of this process right here. And these are different presets that I have loaded over the years. And I found all of these for free on the internet. So something else to play with. And then you can create snapshots of different workflows. We're not going to play with that right now, but basically as you work, you can capture it so you can get back to it as if you're playing with multiple things. So dig deep, explore, and have some fun with this project. When I'm done with this, I'm going to come over here to where it says Save Image, and I'm going to save it as a format of digital negative, and I'm going to hit Save. And that's what you're going to upload. If I hit Open Object right now, it would open up into Photoshop for me. There it goes. There goes the magic. And there it is. Now, if you were to submit this to me, the PSD, once you save it again, it's not going to have all that information saved in it. So I'm just going to do Shift-Command-S, and save it to my computer. I'm saving it to my desktop as a PSD. We'll do that. Quick close. Close this up. Come back here to our desktop, make this a little bit smaller. So here's the DNG that I just saved with my corrections. Here's the TIFF that I started with. Now, up here in the top right, that indicates that we've made adjustments in Adobe Camera Raw. If I double click on this TIFF again, it's going to open back up and show me all of my adjustments. Cancel. If I open up this DNG, click, it's going to open up and show me all of the adjustments. So, turn in the DNG. You can see it's a smaller file, 4.62 megs versus 8.96 megs for the saved TIFF. That's one of the reasons why I want you to do that. The PSD, when I double click on it to open it, it opens into Photoshop with none of the adjustments, so I can't see what you did. And it is a 26.92 meg file. So anyways, that is the basics of what I'm looking for. Dig deep, have fun, keep playing.